Hey guys, welcome back. This is the video where this is going to be the first of a few that we're going to do on critical theory. This one is called Critical Theory and the Culture Industry. Okay, so the critical theorists are Marxists. They're Marxists starting out in Germany in the 1930s-ish. But it's important to understand that they are Marxists. And remember, when we talked about Marx, we talked about the fact that yes, he's concerned about the economy, but the most important, the root of everything for him is he cares about people, and he cares about people having fulfilling lives. And what he sees in the 1800s is an economic system that is making that impossible. It is not possible for him, for workers, to have fulfilling lives. So he is popular among a lot of intellectuals, and especially in Germany, he is very popular. And this is probably a couple of generations after Marx. You end up with guys like I told you about before, Adorno, Horkheimer, Marcuse. Those are the ones that leap immediately to mind. Habermas is part of them, although he's a little bit later, because he's still writing into the late 20th century at least. And what they say is they are looking at people being dominated, and they're looking in the early 20th century, so the rise of Nazis in Germany. And they end up having to leave Germany, and most of them flee to America, where they become very popular with the 1960s anti-Vietnam and sort of just anti-normal society movement of the hippies. But what they say is, the economy was a big deal, obviously, and it's not that it isn't anymore. It's not that capitalism isn't a big deal, but people's lives are being ruined by something else. By the time we get to the 1930s, organized labor has not had a revolution, but it has changed the way work is. So for Marx, there's no minimum wage. By the 1930s, there is. There's no limitation on working hours. You do what the capitalist tells you to do. You show up or you lose your job. By the 1930s, there are labor protections. There's safety. There's limitation on work hours in the week. So the experience of being a worker is not exactly the same. And in some countries, and America is moving in this direction in the 1930s, there is what's called a social safety net, welfare states, where if you fall on hard times, the government, as sort of the actor that's responsible for collective action, will make sure that you don't starve to death. None of these things exist for Marx. Now, it's not that being a worker is just joy in the 1930s, but it's a different circumstance. And the critical theorists are aware, though, that something else has happened at the exact same time that work has become less of a horrible experience. Something else has happened, and those developments were radio and movies. And we think of those things as entertainment, and we think of them as frivolous, and the critical theorists say, yeah, you're right, you do, and that is why they're so dangerous. Because so you live in a world of TV and internet, and obviously you listen to radios and watch movies, but that's not the main thing. But think about how much time you spend, not just time you spend, although think about that, first of all, watching TV or being on the internet, whether it's consuming media from YouTube or social media from Facebook or Instagram or whatever. Just think about how much time you spend doing those things. And then think about this, how addictive those things are. They're designed to be addictive. That's the whole point, especially with regard to the internet, where you're not paying for them, but that's the same way radio was in the early 20th century. You're not paying for it, and because of that, you are being sold to advertisers. So they have got to make it as addictive as possible. So anyway, the critical theorists say this is a huge revolution. And again, talking about radio doesn't sound that revolutionary, but nothing like that exists before. In the history of humanity, nothing like mass media exists. And there's newspapers, but not not electronic and electric, this sort of mass media that where everybody can be listening or watching and having a shared experience at the exact same time. The critical theorists are the first ones who are like, this is not good. So when you see culture industry, think mass media, but mostly think mass media in terms of radio and film, and then think about it hugely in terms of TV and the internet. Newspapers are technically mass media, magazines are technically mass media, but those are things that require more effort and energy. I mean, it takes more effort to go and buy something and open it up and read it than it does to just push a button and this machine comes to life and starts talking to you. So that's their big thing. The culture industry, we want to think about those as mass media, like movies and radio. Sorry, just making sure I'm back on script because I kind of went off. This is the key thing. The culture industry, the critical theorists say, is the most important component of society. In the way that economy was for Marx, they say it's not anymore. Now the most important thing is the culture industry, mass media. They say it dominates people in 3 ways, and at least 3 ways, but these are crucial in terms of your time, in terms of being an opiate, and in terms of turning us into consumers. So first of all, I was making this point earlier, the sheer amount of time that mass media consumes. The average American is interacting with a screen. These statistics aren't this year, but in the 2010s, in that period, the average American is consuming 40 hours a week of mass media. Now, that's a full-time job. And so I'm going to stop right there before we get to opiate. 40 hours a week! That's a ton. And what the critical theorists say is that every minute you're doing that, if the technology isn't telling you your life is being ripped away from you, you are giving up your freedom. Every minute that you're doing that is a minute that you are not spending thinking about how your life should be. You're not spending it thinking, well, what is the key to a fulfilling life for me? And does it involve me listening to the radio or watching TV for 40 hours a week? So just that sheer amount of time is time that you are not spending plotting the revolution, whether it's the grand revolution that Marx saw or a revolution of just taking over your own life, which is pretty revolutionary. All right, so first of all, the sheer amount of time the culture industry takes. Nobody was reading newspapers or reading books 40 hours a week before that. So the culture industry is a revolution. Second, the idea of the opiate of the masses. So this is a term from Marx that was based on religion, but Marx is going to say, but the critical theorists are going to say, yeah. So when you turn on the TV, you go into a coma where you're just sitting there and you're watching. And watch somebody watch TV, but don't be obnoxious about it because you do the same thing and I do the same thing. But you're on a drug at that point. You are having something pumped into your brain that is soothing to you, or that's funny to you, or that's scary to you, or whatever. But the whole point of it is taking your consciousness and focusing it somewhere else. It's pumping feelings into you that are not about your experience of life. They said that's incredibly dangerous. So not only are you devoting all this time, but you may come home from work and be all upset, or you may finish my lecture and be all upset, and then what you do is you go to YouTube and you watch a comedy show or whatever, and that's not bad, I do that, but it automatically takes the edge off in a way that makes you not about to go start a revolution, whether it's a revolution to change society or a revolution to make your life be the way you would want it to be. So that's the idea of the opiate. Third is that that because the culture industry is so much of it's free, it's about selling you to advertisers. If you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And you are being sold to advertisers, and advertisers are absolutely about getting you to buy things. That's the whole point, right? But what they do is they work super hard to not tell you go out and buy this, but to turn you into a person who goes out and buys whatever. That's the point of advertising. It is to shape you, to socialize you, to be a person who doesn't just consume the things that he or she needs, but that wants things. They manufacture wanting inside of you. My God, I sound like a raving lunatic, but that's the critical theorists, right? And they're right about all of it. Everything they said was correct. Now, it doesn't mean that you are controlled by other people. What it means is you have less control of your life. You are less of an autonomous person who is thinking, wait a minute, how do I want life to be? And then pursuing that, you're more likely to react to these things, this incredibly pleasant drug. It's rough. Let me scroll down at my script to make sure I've hit everything. We're at about 11 minutes, but, well, I'm going to finish now. Here's the punchline of this whole thing. They want you, the critical theorists say the difference between the economy being the dominant element of society and the culture industry being the dominant element is when it's the economy, you know you're dominated and you don't like it. When it's the culture industry, you're not aware of it because you love it. That difference, that we don't crave going to our assembly line job, but we crave coming home and watching football on TV or the latest Avengers movie or whatever, or just checking out what's happening on Facebook. That is the incredibly nefarious side in a way that the economy isn't. The economy is just up front with you. The culture industry is not. It's taking away your life and dominating you, and you love it. All right, that's a fantastic ending. They had more things to say, so I will see you in the next video where we'll talk about another one of the critical theorists' perspectives on modern life.